We ready?
We're all set.
All set. Well, let's bring the meeting to order. Any public input? We have public. Anybody else got any comments?
Other than the skunks?
Other than what?
The skunks?
What
Tearing up
skunks?
the course?
I think that problem has been taken care of.
That's what it is.
Yeah,
Next game warden will take care of that.
he could. He could find one.
The next game warden or skunk.
But both, actually. There's a love-hate relationship there.
I see on Ken yesterday, that was possibly the cage on
Oh, it was Saturday, wasn't it?
critters, you know.
We had some skunk smell walking down the hallway today. Just text you, hey, there's skunk smell down the hallway. And there was two checked into that room. Smoking weed right in the damn middle of the afternoon in the room. Just reeks out the hallway. She just turned in.
No smoking.
Any delegations, additions, or deletions? I had one question on, I gotta pull it up, on the last minutes. Bear with me a second. I'll turn that down. It was under the section on the master plan and phase 1. Did we talk about moving T's up to that in phase 1?
We just asked to put it in the budget requests, so we included that we included more in the budget request.
That's what it was.
Yep.
See, I just need somebody to refresh my memory. It's good. Thank you. So approval of last month's minutes. Can I get a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Joe? Mark? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, bills, revenue expense report.
Okay, here's the cemetery revenue, 101 up from 84 same time last year. Expenses, about 25,000 in expenses, 28 last year, just under. Again, salaries as expected is lower than last year, 132 versus 183, but there was a payout last year. Golf course revenue, total of 432 for the year compared to 342 last year. So we're way up at the end of August. This is the end of August. This does not include anything in September. And then expenses, 123 in expenses versus 119 last year. Everything looks pretty much right on track. 119 for salaries versus the 166 from last year.
Salaries is a budget item you cannot change or move.
That's correct. And then bills, didn't have anything.
Nathan, can you click on income at the end of July?
Yep.
Or do you have month to date for August?
You know, we can just pull up last month's report. Would that be okay? That should have it.
We're over 100,000 ahead at the end of July.
I'd have to look at it, I don't remember exactly.
I'll have it here in a second.
Like I looked at Fish Lakes and they were down in August, heat and they were just just like.
Are you just talking July and August, or are you talking
I
for the year?
just want to know, July, end of July to the end of August. That's
Oh, that was revenue. I'm sorry. That's cemetery.
I don't remember what the total for the year that was, but we were about 3,000 behind just in August.
We were 109 ahead, and now we're 90 ahead, so we lost them in August. Is that what Fish Lake did too?
Yeah. There is 3 golf tournaments, about $6,000 worth that are still out there that happened in August but have not paid yet.
Yeah.
So
I thought we were over 100,000 ahead last month.
Did you get your question answered? Yeah, okay. Bills, I think that's where we were. I didn't have anything that stood out. Let's see.
I moved to approve the bills.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Mark. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Old business. I've got a couple items I want to discuss without beating a dead horse too much. There was a special council meeting here a couple weeks ago, and I just had a question. Nathan, you could probably answer it. When Stephanie mentioned on that meeting that we requested $280,000 from the city, I assume that included the equipment and the Phase 1 master plan. Is that where that's coming from?
That's correct, yep.
Okay. It concerned me a little bit that it was all lumped into one thing, and I've said I want those to be separate, that it's like 80 and change for the mowers and the blower, whatever the equipments were, and then the rest was the master plan request.
Yep, so the master plan request was above the revenue amount. So we were trying to match up revenue with expenses is what we were trying to do, so they balance each other out, and this is zero. But anything over that would have been the Phase 1 of the master plan.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. That was confusing to me when it was lumped into one like that. The other thing is, and everybody's aware that the council voted to go with the structure that is now adopted. One thing that came up, and I couldn't answer it that night, and I still don't have an answer to it, was the influx or the addition that the city's contributed to the golf course side was an average of like $23,000 a year for the last 5 years. Wasn't a good chunk of that the buyout for Kevin and Brian, their sick leave and annual leave? And I didn't remember what those were for, and I didn't have the paperwork with me, but it was $40,900 in 2020, and I think that would have been Kevin's. And then in the year prior would have been, or 2 years prior would have been Brian's, but I don't remember what those amounts were for.
Let me run the 5-year.
The reason for I'm asking is, I think, if I remember right, those were either for salary or for benefits or the buyout on a couple employees, and then capital purchases. They weren't necessarily overages that the golf course had for operating. It might have been in 15 or 16, because those were pretty poor years.
It's running a report here for at least the last 5 years, and maybe we can look at it a little closer.
the one buyout would have been in 19, Kevin's in 20.
So 19, they said they only supplemented at $300. but it was 40,900 in 2020.
Okay, so cemetery salaries over the last 5 years would be 152, then 207, then 248, then 244, and then down to 140 in this year to date. So you can kind of just throw that one out because it's not the full year.
Yeah.
But you can look at the last 3 years. That's at the cemetery. And I think what she was saying is it increased because the percentage of the wages of that salary were coming out of the cemetery more and more each year to balance the golf course budget. And then I'll pull up the golf course real quick. And then here's the salaries for the golf course would be 246, 203, 201, 219.
So how do we know how much the city put in those years?
Okay,
We would
so
have had to show in a shortfall.
let's,
I guess I'm just curious, what were those for?
yep, so here's the shortfalls right here at the bottom.
Okay.
28, 24, 299, 40. And obviously, we don't have a shortfall this year.
Right.
Yeah. That's on the golf course side.
Do we know what that went towards, or what caused that? Those amounts?
It could be lower revenue. It could be, it's hard to say. I'd have to dig into that a little bit to, if they were short.
Kevin's all his buyout went to the golf course directly.
I don't believe so. I think it was whatever the percentage was, it was that percentage on the golf course and cemetery, I believe.
But it would came out of,
I would think that it did.
but
Yep.
then he also didn't have your salary.
That's correct. It probably balanced out.
Yeah. Okay. I just didn't know if it was an equipment purchase that what put us over, or what was or if it was the buyouts on those.
So many things happened throughout the year, and I don't know that Jason would even know prior to 2020.
So in 19, there was 2 engines that blew out in a skid loader and a fairway mower, I know. Like I said, the first buyout was in 2019, the second was in 2020. 17 and 18 were fairly wet years. I mean,
Yep.
what actually happened in 7, or was it 18 and 19? Yeah, 18 and 19, that's right, because I came back in 19. So 18 and 19 were severely wet years, so that affected income, didn't necessarily cost or expenses.
2008 to 2014, the city threw in 0. I'm hoping I'm better than 14, I think that was last year.
So if it's a contingency, or if an engine blew up, they go ask the city for contingency funds, it gets approved, and that could be, it could be something like that.
Sure.
But if you're short on revenue, you're doing the same thing. It's a contingency that has to be supplemented by the city somehow.
So you thought 18 and 20 were the buyouts?
19.
19 and
Because that 19 is the year I came, so that 2019, July of 19. So that would have been the first one, and then Kevin retired last year in 2020.
Brian's buyout didn't be very big, I mean, 15, 18 years maybe?
Don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
With regard to that, and I think it was brought up at that council meeting as well, the comment regarding the purchase of the golf carts, is that now going to show up as a shortfall on the golf course side?
See, that'll be up to council, so like you see, we're up 137, we're up revenue this year. We have enough revenue to cover the golf carts this year.
I mean, that was kind of my understanding was just what you said. But the bottom line is if we put the cost of those golf carts plus the cost of our 22 budget, we're going to be major shortfall. If they lump it all together. I was under the impression that it was kind of a yearly payment type of thing. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's what I thought initially too, but I think that's changed, I believe, isn't it, that they want it paid off in 1 year?
The golf carts?
Yeah.
Yeah. We can, I mean, yeah, the money's there.
Okay. So and that's what, 80-some thousand?
Yep.
About 86.
86,000. And we asked for, so when we asked for the equipment of 80-some thousand, is that built into our expected expenses?
Yes.
That part is?
Yes.
Okay. So that won't affect,
That'll be the part of that balanced budget.
right.
Yep.
Yep.
And my understanding, well, I mean, we'll see when the mayor presents the,
Did they change from the old days when we used to have a reserve fund? You know, sometimes it was 180, 100, 210,000 reserve fund for when you had the bad year. And golf course are going to have the bad year.
yep, no, we have that, and let me run that for you.
I think did they change the law on that, on enterprise funds and how much you can keep in your reserve?
I don't believe so.
That's one advantage of the enterprise fund, is that you can have that.
Since Stephanie came, I know they've changed some stuff. It was probably in before that. It just slipped through the cracks. I know Kevin said he had to spend some because of the reserve.
If I recall right, talking to Kevin is back when they got one of the other fleets of golf carts, they had a pretty good reserve fund and they ended up purchasing carts and some equipment.
And then he's
Kinda
double-
depleted
double card-
Yeah, they kind of had a double whammy in there. Had a double whammy there. Didn't help any.
Me personally, if we've got the money to pay them off, I'd say pay them off, and then we're free and clear moving forward. That's 90 to 100 grand a year that we don't have to pay. That's what our income is off the cards.
This is
That's just my thought.
This is just the, let me zoom in a little bit here. This is just a snapshot today, so you can't think that you have $191,000 but that's what you have in cash right now. And at the end of, or at the beginning of the year, it was 51,000 on day one.
That got whittled down by the time the golf season started.
Yeah, so at the end of the season, we're still paying out of that cash for salaries and expenses.
If we paid like a third of it each year, as the city charges interest. You remember?
I pay a third of what now?
Let's say the cart took us,
Thank you.
let's say we had a normal year and the cart took us 3 years. Is the city charging us interest?
I don't believe so. Because it's not a loan, it's just the, yeah.
You just look at the income from a few years ago, to absorb 80,000, 180,000, more, 160,000 1 year is, that's a lot to absorb.
Yeah.
If you go back and ask the city for more, that's a pretty good deal.
Right.
If you get it.
Either that or we determine a minimum amount that has to be maintained.
Well, we believe this cash will be at about 150 at the end of the year. I mean, that's what we're thinking. And then, so if they take the golf carts off of that, then it'll drop it back down to that, closer to that 50, 60.
course, big chunk of that is one less full-time salary and benefits for the year, so. So that's a big chunk where it come from. That and being a fairly good year.
Right.
And we're chugging along, and September's looking pretty good. Revenue-wise, we had 3 outings on Saturday. Like I said, we had, and in those August numbers, there was, I don't remember, 3 or 4 days that Eric wasn't able to get the deposits in. So there is a couple regular days also that should have been on August that will be in September. So, but that happens from month to month all the time. But
You told me a $10,000 day on Saturday in September.
yeah,
That just don't happen. 260 rounds, that's something you could do in the longest day of the year, and you're probably in June.
yeah.
It's almost impossible to get that many this time of
That's
year.
3 outings, so
What's that?
that was 3 outings.
Yeah, one was, 2 were small. There weren't really.
Yeah, they were. One was a small school reunion. One was a family reunion, and one was graphic packaging. So but it was pretty much wall to wall, pretty much all day. So.
And this weekend was good now too. 85 on Saturday, Sunday.
Today was about as slow a day as we've had in quite a while, except for the couple days I was aerifying. So, but
I stopped out Saturday when I got back from Sioux Falls. I needed to pick up gloves, and they were just finishing up. But this was about 5 o'clock. He was done.
mhm.
You could just see it. He doesn't have all the help that he normally has, and boy, you could see it.
He texted me to see if Jackie was available Sunday. I said, she has no help.
Any other old business? All right, so Clubhouse Report.
Eric is not here. He could not find anybody to run the clubhouse for him. So, so I'll just kind of breeze through this. If you guys have questions, I'll answer whatever I can. And if we need to give Eric a quick phone call, if there's something pressing, we can. Obviously, August rounds are up. Total rounds for the year. We're already at 20,000 rounds, and that's about what we did last year total. Memberships, and we keep on getting, obviously, fund passes and all that. If we get them now, they just pay for it for the next year. So if they start now, they'll drop off if they decide not to a year from now. So, but I mean, 593 members, that's a nice number to be at. Me and Eric had a number in our head, and it was lower than that, so that we wanted to hit this year, and so it's been good. We've had also another reason here in the last month we've gone up even higher is student memberships. The college kids come back in the fall and they get a student membership. So the one thing we are down in is punch cards, but I mean that's pretty obvious with memberships up as high as they are. So that's not all a bad thing. So any questions on that?
Good looking numbers.
So this is tournaments we have yet. Parks invite we already had. Lakeview two-person we had. Mitchell invite. Well, middle school invite we've had. Graphic packaging, Jordan. Pork producers here on Wednesday. It's 11 o'clock shotgun, and then boys invite on Friday. So get your rounds in early on Wednesday and Friday. So, and as you see, we've got a couple fundraisers and outings, and this final senior tournament of the year, the 27 hole shootout. Got a lot of things going on yet in September. We did have one that wanted to do something on the 24th, and we just said we got too much going on. We offered October, we're wide open, and we haven't heard back from them. So unfortunate, kind of had to turn them away, but we got to take our regular golfers into consideration too. So and that week there was like, I don't remember, it was like 6 things in 8 days, so we just couldn't justify it. So, like I said, September's looking good for revenue and events and everything, so. Questions?
How about the superintendent's report? Is he here?
Nope.
Couldn't find any help?
I don't know, maybe, the monument and an infant section that was supposed to be started already. The block is there. Just waiting for the contractor to get there to do it. Going to be working on seeding and stuff. We got the infant section over in Calvary seeded today, so that's looking pretty good. John is just kind of getting him broke in on all the different processes and stuff. We sneak him over to the golf course when we can to kind of get him broke in there a little bit, so when he's needed.
John,
Thurman? Oh, we hired him as, he's been with us for about 2 months in the cemetery, full time. He replaced Scott.
okay. Recognize a new guy, but I don't,
Oh,
I can't put a name.
okay, I thought we said that at one of the meetings, so, but yeah, that is John Thurman, so he's been working out good. He came over from the parks, so, but yeah.
I remember you had brought somebody over from Park and Rec, but I didn't.
Oh, sorry about that. I thought everybody knew that, so. The work on the digital cemetery has kind of gotten started. We had the city set some set points for District 3, and District 3 has started work. I don't know how far they've gotten into them. I haven't contacted them. So that's about it in the cemetery. Airification, we did that on the 23rd and 24th. Things healed pretty well. Worked on, we verticut last Tuesday. Today we verticut in the opposite direction, so with things come along pretty well. Hoping to set a little more tentative dates on airification for next year, so that way, when I did it, it was the most wide open possibility I had without going into October. So I know we kind of ran into a couple smaller events. Not a whole lot I could have done about it. We just kind of looked at the schedule, and that's what seemed to work the best. So. Had some skunks going after grubs, so we've live trapped the skunks and got them out of there. Got to do some more treatments and stuff, so hopefully more don't move in and keep on digging. So seeding projects hopefully wrap them up here this week, old stumps and all that. Doing some research on the zebra mussels. Nathan shared some information with me the other day, so we'll see where that goes and what needs to be done or doesn't need to be done. So evaluating options, possible options for the savings from the structure change. So staff, equipment, projects, need for all of them, but it's just a matter of which direction we go. We can come back to that. I've got trees marked that are dead, dying, problem trees, according to the master plan. There will be more that come down, but I at least wanted to mark the ones that were in definite decline or issues, so. Hoping to work on some tee boxes and other projects as time permits, so.
Is there any plans to take out that willow stump on 15?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a matter of how to do it exactly, because to grind it, I haven't quite figured out how to do it, but yeah, it needs to be done. That, and then there's that one on 17 also that should be, that one's a little further off the edge, but yeah, that's a definite. That and that tree between 6 and 13 that we've been looking at for 3 years, so that one I need to get the lift in and take it down systematically because I don't want to damage the other trees around it. So we had plans of doing that last winter, but with we just didn't get to it. The couple times we tried to take it out there, it was too soft and we would have ripped things up. And it's a fairly heavy unit, so. But
Who will do that for you? Are you gonna do that? Take that big tree out?
yeah,
Or is the city gonna help you?
if they have time, they can, but we have that lift that goes 45 feet up in the air, so so that was, we took out a big chunk of trees last year, and we're planning on doing whatever we can this year too. There is the request that we made for money for tree removal and other projects from the master plan also, so we'll see where that ends up. But we have full plans of, at the very minimum, the trees I marked, and like that stump and stuff, we're going to try to do whatever we can.
Tell me the master plan. So you say you got money for the master plan to remove some trees.
Well, we don't yet. It's not approved yet. We requested it.
Okay. So.
I need to correct it. We do have that 35,000 available.
Well, yeah,
We haven't decided what we're doing.
Yeah,
with it.
we have 35,000 left over from this current year.
Okay.
So we do have some money.
Okay, so tell me that. So the 35,000, who do we pay that to?
It depends on which project we decide
Say
to
it's
go
trees-
forward
Say
with.
it's trees that we're doing. I mean, I guess what I'm kind of wondering, you were telling me that you're going to go and you're going to work on getting the trees up.
Yep.
And my comment was, okay, is the city going to help us? So if we have the city help us, do we pay that, or do we just have them come and help us?
I guess you'd be better to answer that.
You wouldn't be paying us, no.
Okay,
Yeah.
So
Where's the
then why are we,
35,000 go then?
so why are we not using more of the city to do it and not have to do the 35 and whatever to pay somebody else?
I can give you an example. So we're doing some tree work in the lake this year. We can only handle so much. We are actually we're requesting in our budget to hire a firm to
So
come.
what you're saying is that.
A tree service
pretty well
to come-
maxed out on that side,
It-
on the tree help.
It depends. It just depends on weather and different things, but we will help out where we can, and but it just depends. We don't really have a plan and haven't really discussed that, like what level.
The reason I'm bringing it up
Yeah.
is that in our conversations before, the mayor sat right over there and said, when you need city help, get it.
Yep.
You know, I'm just saying, this put them on, just makes them, because then it's less on you, Jason. We can get a bunch of those big trees out and get maybe a plan where we can do a bunch of it. I know it's all weather related, but to me, it just makes a little more sense. If we're
Yep.
paying for it, let's not pay for it, let's have the city kind of pitch in with it.
Yep.
Just a
Yep.
thought.
Yep.
Well, and just for example, street department was slow here this last week, so a big pile in the trees,
Sure.
that's gone.
Okay,
So I think when they're as busy as we are, and I mean, it's all,
You may have answered my question.
yeah.
Just if you're saying you're so busy, that's, and they are, I guess that's just it.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking,
I guess,
seems like should be a way to
Yeah.
bring those guys in for a little bit of time and really take the pressure off of you.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, we're asking for 130, 150,000, whatever that amount is. And that would be the cost of hiring somebody outside of the city to come in and do that.
Do the trees.
Yeah. If they can't do it, or if, let's say they can do it, a portion of it, then it would reduce that amount that we've requested to pay somebody else by doing it in-house. So,
Another thought to that would be if they're going to pile it up and the city comes in and takes it, hauls it off, you know, you don't have to pay for all the services, or we can pay for portions of it if we're doing large, you know, areas or lots of trees. You know, there's ways that we can work together with the contractor and
and I think that's where Kevin Norby came up with the figure for that, was hiring a company to come in and do it.
Yeah.
And so we have the ability, if they're available and they're available, to reduce that amount, at least part of it, depending on equipment and staffing and.
as long,
If we save money doing that, we ask for 150, the city gives us 150,000 towards tree removal.
And
Now,
tee
that can be
boxes
used
and,
at other places, doesn't have to be, as long as it's on the golf course.
we included several things on there, yep.
that way it's a little more flexible.
that's why I asked that question at
And
the
then-
beginning of that. Where was the tee box discussion? Because that was also included in phase one. Well, I remember that now. We added that at the last meeting, so we could cover some of those other projects with that amount of money.
And, I mean, with our resources we got, we're going to try to do as much as we can so that we will retain some of that money for future projects, or we can do more tee
Well, I
boxes.
was just wondering if it's designated to a certain
Yep.
part of the job, or it can be used on the golf course someplace else.
You know,
Yep.
one thing to keep in mind here, and not everybody is totally aware of it, but having been on the park board as well as the golf course, the thing to keep in mind, you know, when you say use the city facility, well, that's been going on forever. But the thing to keep in mind, it isn't one way. There's going to be times when they're going to call Jason up, maybe at Cadwell, and say, we need your help here. And, you know, because of the way the city works together, Jason will go and work in Cadwell Park. Or maybe somewhere outside. Might be the street department, I don't know. But, I mean, the bottom line is, it isn't one way. We can't just always expect the city, Nate's crews on Park and Rec, to be at our beck and call without us returning something for it. There's always something you have to give back, you know.
For instance, we did not do it last year, but the years prior, our payloader and a guy did go and help push out alleys when there was a major snow event and the street department couldn't keep up. So, I mean, just
Well, I
instances
mean-
like that.
The bike path,
Yeah.
prime example. Bike path was never meant to be part of the golf course and cemetery. But what was it, 2-3 years ago? The mayor decided, well, Park and Rec can't handle all of the snow removal. So guess what? It came to the golf course. So, I just want you guys to be aware of, it isn't a one-sided deal, but we can just constantly call up the forestry department and say, we need you to come out and take our trees down. It doesn't work that way.
Well, and when we're fully staffed, we're a little more able to do that. Right now, we're not able to go and help. Not that we can't, but it's just we're a little less able to.
Oh, we're short of man.
Yeah, yeah.
I got one concern on taking the trees out. Are you guys all in favor of taking a tree out if phase two never comes to life? You're taking them out to go to the second phase. The second phase is a lot of money.
And That's a great question, because, when we went over and played Elmwood here a month or so ago, I would have said prior to that, no, if we can't do this. But after seeing that course, and it's very well wooded. I mean, there's a lot of trees, but they are strategic trees. And you're never, so my answer to that question for me personally is yes. I want to see some of these spots opened up.
Most of the trees he's picking out is to make phase 2 better, to be eliminated.
Right, but there's also value in having, pushing a ball into the trees and still having an out versus, I mean, there's a lot of times you got to hit backwards because they're just so thick. And then they talk about the health of the surrounding trees and letting them establish. And from what I saw over there, it's amazing how full these trees are. And, they're obstacles. I mean, they still are, but to me, it looks healthier than, especially the ones that are bunched really, really tight together, like I think along 4, the left side of, west side of 4. You got that row between 2 and 4, and it's just one tree after another after
First
another.
part's Linden and the ends,
Yeah.
they call Chinese elm.
A lot of cottonwood.
The roll there by
Yeah.
Green is Lindens.
And I'm
Yep.
hoping that they're not just identified as just a tree, they're identified as this type of tree, and
Yep.
that a
Well,
replacement will be.
Yeah. When Mr. Norby and I went around, that's part of what he was looking at. He was looking at cottonwoods and lindens, and he was looking at types of trees and desirable trees and trees that are towards the end of their life, and when, just because there's an X on that plan doesn't mean that tree has to come out. If there's a row of trees, first thing we're going to do is we're going to take out damaged, bad crotches, those types of trees, and then we'll move on from that. So just because it says it on this map doesn't absolutely mean it has to come out. So, and if we decide we get going down this road and we decide that we're not sure if it's going to happen or not, if we leave a couple extra trees, it's not the end of the world. We're going to systematically do this, assuming that we're going forward. And the plan is to take it to council next Monday and not necessarily ask for approval on it, but get their input on it and present it to them. So I guess nothing's set in stone each year until they actually approve the money. So
Nate, didn't the city do a survey of the trees due to the ash?
Mm-hmm.
Did any of that include the golf course?
I remember talking to Mr. Thurman about it when we did that, and I may have his information. He told me how many he had.
I
and-
do have that map in my office. I
Okay.
believe it's like 183 on the golf course and like 70 some on the cemetery.
Sounds about right.
I think there's like 180 some in the golf course, ash, and then like 70 or 80 in the cemetery.
And isn't the plan, the city's plan, to start removing ash trees?
If you want an ash tree removed in the boulevard, we'll remove it at no cost.
Are we doing anything in the parks?
Yeah, we take them out whenever we can.
I mean, whether they're damaged or
Yep.
they're
You're
still.
taking ash trees down there healthy?
We are sticking with the, sick ones or ones that are causing damage to, we just like to get rid of them, like
Has there
to,
been any ash borers spotted in Mitchell?
not that I'm aware of.
They're around the Sioux Falls area. They're,
As far as west I heard of.
I talked to John Ball about this, and he said they're coming. There's no stopping them, but it's within the next couple of years. And the other part of that is they're probably already here, but they just haven't started causing damage and haven't been identified yet. I mean, so.
Jason, are the trees that you're taking down, that you have, it's all the damaged trees right now, or diseased trees, aren't they?
The only
So
ones,
that
the
are-
only ones I've marked so far are either dead, dying, or cart path issue, or,
Gotcha. Nothing to do with the master.
nope, nope. They're ones that probably need to be taken out anyways.
Exactly.
I just wanted to identify them now before they lose their leaves, and it's something I do every year. So,
Well, I know there's a Widowmaker out there, what is it, on 13? I'm not sure
Probably.
where it's at. It's probably that big round string, get her in the door, you know, and that could come down at any time by itself. So, those are the kind of things we are.
well, and
My best nuts.
And I'm hoping when we are fully staffed, like in the winter, if the snow cooperates and we have good frost in the ground, I mean, we could very easily run that lift most of the winter, weather permitting, and between the golf and the cemetery, and just go down fairway or rough lines and just clean up trees going up, taking out widowmakers, taking out bad parts, bringing them up. I mean, that's kind of an endless thing that could happen. But first off, need more help, and then Mother Nature needs to cooperate too.
Totally different line. Last week in the two-man, the fairway traps on 9 had holes in them. Put your fist in. What is that?
Probably fox.
What do they take it for?
Those cicada killers.
What's that?
Those cicada killers, those big wasps that fly around in the trap.
Or whatever that are.
Yep, fox, they'll
I've
dig.
seen that before.
Yep.
They're huge.
Yeah.
I go, I'm trying to go, oh, look at that. Have you seen that
Yeah.
before? The only place I noticed them was 9 fairway traps.
Right in the edge of the trap.
On the right one, and they're digging into the fairway bank.
Yep. I'm gonna guess either that or a squirrel buried a nut, was digging up the nut. I don't know. Without seeing it,
Okay.
yep. But fox will go after those cicada killers. Yep, they actually make more of a mess than the cicada killers do. So.
All right. Master plan. Action to approve the 2020 golf course master plan.
Okay, this is the master plan presented by Norby through a public input process, and I don't even remember how many public meetings we had, but it was several that we had here. What you see here is the phasing that he's put together. We didn't feel there was a need to change too much within the description because we don't have how that would change the pricing, so we kept that in there. It doesn't mean we can't add some things to phase one as we go, which we have already done. We've put the word teas and a few other things in there for the budget request. And then this is the drawing of the plan for the golf course improvements. And if Jason wants to talk more details, I also included the survey results for you. Nothing really that I wanted to point out. Is there anything, Jason, that stuck out for you that you wanted to mention?
No, I guess it's just a matter of,
So kind of how this would, you kind of mentioned, if we do phase two, but I would think we would kick off a capital campaign of some sort that we would start looking for sponsorships or doing some fundraising for the project. So I think we have that defined. We know what we'd be asking for and give us kind of a starting point. So if you're raising, let's say, 250,000 of that 494, raising half of it, and then going to the city and asking for the other half, that's a standard practice in our department at the Parks and Rec. But that's an idea or a thought. Do you guys have any other questions about the master plan? And
It's going to be even when we adopt this, it's going to be a work in progress. I mean, depending on the year, depending on input from the public, it doesn't necessarily have to follow those. We can adjust as a board the requests, correct?
yeah, exactly. This is just the kind of the guide, and that will change as we go. Yep.
How many years does this cover?
Well, I mean, if you go by if you do a phase a year, 8 years, but there's nothing saying.
The reason I ask that is, if you read it, phase 2, abandon hole 12, reconstruct 11.
Mhm.
The next year, reconstruct 14. And it kind of goes that route. How many years are we going to be without 18 holes of golf?
Well, that's just kind
Well,
of
one
the.
thing about it, you leave 11 go for, reconstruct that, still have green.
That's kind of the decision that needs to be made in that too. I mean, there's nothing saying that you couldn't come have somebody donate half of it and you ask for the city half of it and you just do it all in a year and a half. But it's more than likely not going to happen. You got to take into consideration what the appetite for not having 18 holes for
Well,
how long.
ultimately,
Yep.
you're going to bag all tournaments.
Yep. Well,
I mean, unless we do the reconstruction before we do the abandonment.
If you do it in that order, I think it would be reconstruct hole 13 is what that should say, right? If it was in order, that would be the new 13, correct? On phase 3.
Yeah, I think you.
Yeah.
Talk to him, I think you can come in August 1. Boom, make sure after August 1, you only mess up one side of the 9. You still have 9 from August on. I don't think that'll hurt your membership much. If you mess up the spring, people ain't gonna join, they're gonna join someplace else.
Right.
mm,
In the fall, that's just the way people are. You have early spring, your membership's up.
Yeah.
You have a wet spring, your membership's gonna go down. And
Well-
when he said that you can, by the layout, you can keep 9 holes. I think that's huge,
Oh, I do too.
income-wise.
And I don't think
And then
there's
they
a
can
time
start
where
August 1.
you'd even need to shut down an entire 9. You're going to have maybe a hole or two that'll be out of commission, and that'd be just in the fall, and maybe a little bit of the spring, but
The whole point of my comment was to get us thinking, what's the best way to do this?
yeah.
Not that we shouldn't do it, it's just that, let's just, not get wild and crazy.
Well, especially like constructing 11 new green on 11. You still got the green to play until the new one's ready for a hole.
Just on that real quick.
That would take 12 out.
Yeah.
You could probably get up and make 12 a 90-yard par 3 too.
There will be some working on the fairway coming down to 11 also, but just getting back to where Brian's concern is so like what will be hole 14, the new par 3? I mean, that theoretically that could be constructed without disturbing anything.
Yeah.
So and some of this also is lumped together so that if we are bringing a contractor in, they got enough work to make it worth their time.
And get good bids.
Yep, and get good bids and you bring somebody in to build one green or
Yeah.
3 tee boxes or whatever, and your cost per tee box or per complex is going to be higher than if you have a little bit bigger project. So that was part of it also, is kind of lumping some of it together. I mean, I've heard of a couple of members say, let's just do it, get it all done. I want to see it done. So, I mean,
Maybe they'll leave the foundation.
Well, that's going to be
Well-
one of the biggest questions going forward is once we, I mean, the tree removal is one thing, we can get past that. But once we start turning dirt, the other phases that are going to be tied to that need to have funding available, because you can't unring the bell, and then what happens? So you do phase 2, and we don't have anything available for phase 3 or 4, and we got to have it locked.
Well, I think we also got to sit down and somebody draw up a plan for the tee boxes, because I think there's certain holes that we don't have to put tee boxes, new ones.
Yeah.
I gotta believe that we got enough brains in this town to build those tee boxes ourselves.
well, there's nothing saying we can't.
Right.
I mean, there's none of this saying that we can't do it
You know,
ourselves.
right now, 8 doesn't need a new tee box, women, children, or
It needs leveling.
dead old man.
Every tee box out there at the very minimum needs to be level.
Well, I agree, level, but to go down 200 yards and build a new one.
We don't need a 4-yard
50
tee
yards.
box on 8. I agree with you, 100%. Yep,
And I'm sure there's other holes that we
yep.
won't have to build a tee box, level them, yeah.
He was talking 4,600 yards, so you're talking, you're taking 1,000 yards off. That's gonna be almost every one.
8's not one,
What's that? Except 8.
8's not one, for sure.
But when you look, just playing this weekend at Elmwood and Willow, they've got that short option. I mean, there's 5 sets of tee boxes, and some of them are up there. Unless you look for them, you don't even pay attention to them, but driving by, it's like,
All right, next one by another.
yeah, it makes sense. And that's something and that's one of the inputs I'm getting from golfers is, and this may require some restructuring of this, and some of this, I'm sure, is tied to construction, but tee boxes are a big priority to a lot of people.
Well, I think Kevin pushed that real hard. Women and children are your future.
Yep. Yeah.
And then, like, what club do you use on like 3 tee box?
On 3, I use my 9.
Your what?
My 9.
9 iron? Yeah. So you still hit your iron to get a good club head speed, yeah. I see a lot of woods coming off, from that, from ladies, and when that's about a 3. Well, his point was, if 3 should be a 5 iron, it should be a 5 iron for every type player, every tee box. And that made sense, because, when Jackie's playing Salem number 9, she was in the driver. And I'm thinking, I'm driving her a par 3, and it's, I don't know, what it was, 150 yards.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah. What he said made sense.
It's something I'd never thought about.
They need some 70 yards par 3s.
And
Because I look at 3 and I think it's short. And, but I bet you played a lot of ladies on Ladies' Day there earlier, the drivers, don't you, some of the older ones? On 3.
Most of the older ladies
Yeah,
use either the driver or a 3-wood.
yeah.
and just,
And that's gotta be, what is 3 ladies, 130?
Oh, I think it's that far. I think like 112 or 118
Is
or
it?
something.
yeah, something like that. I don't remember exactly, but it's,
But the thing that, I'm relating to my situation. I've got 2 hole-in-ones on number 3. Both were gotten with a pitching wedge. Today, I can't reach that green either.
And
I mean,
most of us.
it changes.
You're the same sport, same.
Yeah, I know. I mean, So, I mean, shortening those up doesn't mean you have to play it,
Right.
but if it's there, go for it.
Well, and just because it's a red tee up there doesn't mean the women have to go up there and play.
No,
It's not, it's a forward tee, it's not a women's tee.
And
It's-
it doesn't
it-
prevent anybody else from going up there and playing it either.
Yeah,
That's why it
yeah.
needs to not be called a
Yeah.
women's tee, the senior
Yep.
tee. the-
Yeah.
And Kevin suggested maybe even changing our colors so that way it's not, red is typically always women. Well, we're gonna make that
Make the
purple
gate
or,
ones red then.
no. So,
I think we're in a good position to adopt it or approve it.
Yeah, if you adopt it, and then we would take this to council. We could do this on Monday, or the next one would be October 4th, I believe. I won't be there on Monday, but Jason has volunteered himself to take this on if he needs to.
So we need a motion to approve this?
Yes.
That's a motion for the master plan, and all that we'll be doing is the phase one of that.
Well, no,
Or do we
we're,
just do, we're doing the whole thing as one and see?
yep, and it's a work in progress document. It's always subject to change and approval by the board and ultimately funding.
So,
So,
rearranging it.
yep, yep.
I will make a motion to approve the master plan.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Were you gonna change, was that on hole, on phase 3, no, was that on hole 13? Or is that actually hole 14? Or is hole 14 on the phase 2 part?
That's the current hole 14, but it would be, if you finished phase 1 and 2, it would be hole 13.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you, Jason?
How much was that cooling fan of irrigation? You remember?
5,000.
What was that again?
I was hoping for, the last one I purchased in Minnesota was only about 2,000, but the pricing I'm getting here now is around that 5,000 to 7,000.
Bottom, the last part of things, what the cost was for that irrigation.
Irrigation pump up?
Okay, cemetery policies.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just take this one. The Attorney General's office contacted Justin and to ask why we had number 13 in our policies, since we can't legally prohibit firearms. We just assume just take it out. So we have it as just removed. We don't see any need for it. I don't know if you have any comments, it's up to the board. And then on the dog, with the dogs, we thought we have an exception for the bike path because there's so many people walking their dogs on that bike path anyways. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to
Is there a
exclude.
bike path through the cemetery?
Well,
Yes, there is.
yeah, going between the servicemen's and through the main part of it.
That may
Going
not,
up the driveway,
Yeah, going up the driveway.
Yeah.
but they don't, I mean,
There are
they're
people,
walking the roads in the cemetery.
yeah. Oh, yeah. People from Vantage Point all the time.
And they're walking dogs.
Yeah. Yeah. And they kind of always have. It hasn't really been enforced. I guess it's kind of one of those things, how badly do you want to fight it?
There's signs up, correct?
There are signs up saying no pet area, but
I mean, the bottom line is, and we all know it, you know, there's an ordinance in the city that anytime you're walking your dog, it's gotta be on a leash, and you gotta have a way to get rid of their debris.
yep.
None of them, or I should
That's
say
not
none.
enforced either.
The vast majority of them. I mean, we got, I think Kevin got chewed out by the mayor because the bike path up along the trees on 15, it stunk like dog manure.
Well,
And, you know, whose fault is that?
yeah, yeah.
And I mean, we've reached a point where the city is now providing bags at virtually every park for people's pets. And the taxpayers are flipping the bill on it.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's bad enough when you have it at home and they do it in your yard. And just keep it off.
Yep.
If for some reason the board wanted to allow firearms and wanted me to go back to Justin, that we could have this conversation, but we just assumed to take it out, so that's our recommendation. And then if you wanted allow dogs in the bike path or not, that's up to you as well. Just figure since we're bringing this, we might as well talk about that too.
The only other thought on that is just to make sure that they stay on the roads in the cemetery if you'd want to adopt that too. So, I mean, it's just a matter of where it's at. And, am I going to chase down every single last person that walks through there with a dog? I don't know if I really have time for that. So,
So I'm half colorblind, but you just added except on the designated bike path
Yes.
and just remove the firearms prohibition.
Altogether, yeah.
What's that?
We have firearms in military field.
Yeah, well, that was.
that's
in
the
there.
exception.
Oh, that was I in there?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's always been in there, with the exception of.
motion to approve the policy.
I'll make a motion to approve this.
Brian? I'll second it. All in favor, say
You're on
aye.
the board, you can second
It
it.
was Lynette's turn.
Was it? I got your back.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anything else for the good of the cause?
We did not make it back to that funding for the savings.
That would be in your,
I had it in my report, and I was
Right
going to
here.
make it back.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess the main thing is just need direction on where we go from here on that.
And this is the $42,000 that we're saving
Approximately.
on salaries by this structure?
Do you have to spend that?
Do I have to?
You can't carry it over.
That's the million-dollar question here, because I'm not, I'm not,
Talking about the reserve from before, it used to just carry it over just in case next year's a really crappy year.
yeah, yep.
Or is that-
And I have no problem. I guess the question is, I mean, this directive came from council. Is it meant for,
Is it the golf course or the cemetery or both?
yeah, I mean, I mean, I could spend $42,000 on a lot of different things, and yeah, it wouldn't be a problem. But as far as what the golf course has set for its budget for next year, if we got to stay within the constraints of that, there isn't $42,000 left. So it depends on how you're looking at it. So is it golf, is it cemetery, is it a little bit of both?
Well, that was my question at the council meeting, is the figures weren't broken down by golf course and cemetery.
Yeah.
And the savings, I was unclear, is this a golf course savings or is this a cemetery savings? If it is, we need to know which one it goes to, or which one is saving the money.
In a way, I think it's both, but we did ask for equipment to spend all the money. You know, we didn't leave anything in there with our request on the golf course side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the way what we asked for already, for the revenue we set forth and the expenses we set out, we got that so that it covers what our income was.
With the exception of the capital phase 1.
Yeah, yeah, that was considered separate. So there again, if we got to stay within those constraints, there isn't room yet. So it depends on how you look at it. I mean, there's $42,000 worth of stuff we could certainly spend in the cemetery. So I mean, but there's nothing against saving it also. So.
What's our wish list?
Oh, I mean, like I had the conversation with Nathan the other day, I was like, well, I'd kind of like to see what gets approved or not approved through the budget process first before
100%.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know what's going to get approved. So if something doesn't get approved, then I would kind of like, because I asked for it for a reason. So I would like to try to get that first and then move on from there.
In other words, he doesn't want to compete with his equipment that he asked for.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, and very easily a guy could go in and do $42,000 lease program, and that $42,000 set up, that's designated for the next 3 or 5 years. I mean, I could very easily do something like that too. So, I mean, and there's nothing saying we can't ask. I mean, we can ask for whatever we want. They kind of gave a directive, but they didn't say we're going to give you it. We got to ask for it first. So we could use more labor, we could do projects, we could do equipment. There's a need in all areas. But there again, I asked for projects in the cemetery and equipment in the cemetery. I asked for projects and equipment in the golf course. Well, I'd kind of like to see where we're at first before I make too much of a request. I mean,
You touched on it there a second, but do courses typically on their major equipment purchase buy the equipment, or do they participate in a lease program?
a little bit of both. I mean, it depends on how well they're off. I mean, do most golf courses have $80,000 a year to buy 2 pieces of equipment? No. Most golf courses, either they go without or they do a lease program. A lot of them. Not all, but.
So to me, that seemed like I mean, you'd have to crunch the numbers to see how it pays out.
Yeah.
But
Well,
to have good quality equipment consistently, to me, it makes more sense to have a leased fleet. Your rough mowers, your fairway mowers, maybe not your rough mowers, but maybe a complete package.
well, and you
What
can.
would that cost a year? Versus these things and
There is.
forever and selling them.
There's a golf course, municipal golf course in the state that I know of. I'm not going to mention their name, but they just set up a lease program. They were going to buy a couple pieces of equipment for, I think he told me like $100,000. And he went to the finance and he said, I can have every piece I need. And it's going to be $70,000 a year for the next 5 years. And they jumped all over it. So he's got $70,000 payments for the next 5 years, which he's paying interest on. He's going through the company.
But had nothing after 5 years also.
Right.
No, I think it's a lease to buy.
Yeah,
So-
they would keep them at the
So,
end of the lease.
Yep, with the dollar buyout. So, And there's golf courses that do that. They have a lease program for 3, 4, 5 years, and they just plan on turning it over every cycle. And just because you do a whole fleet, say your 2 rough mowers you don't want to turn, there's nothing saying you have to turn them at the end of that. You buy them out, you keep them for a couple more years, and you turn everything else over. So, I mean, it's however you want to set it up. The equipment companies, they'll work with you. However you want to do a 2-year, a 3-year, 5-year, lease to purchase, true lease, they'll do whatever you want.
Which would be easier to get through the city? Coming to the board and, going to the council and asking them. Is there a thought on that? To me, part of it is, I've always thought if we could lease and have good equipment and just keep it moving, not necessarily even buying them out. If there was an option that was a really good one, you want to buy it.
Well, and there's certain pieces I would definitely want. You want to keep in top-notch shape. And that's what I'm asking for this year is 2 greens mowers. I want to make sure we don't fall behind there first and then move on to the next pieces. But yeah.
But you haven't checked it out? Have you checked that kind of stuff out?
Into a lease program?
Yeah.
I've been talking to
Okay.
equipment distributor about it. And it can very easily be done. It's just a matter of how we want to structure it. Well, you guys got to ask for it. But the way I set it up before all this come about, kind of already, we knew the carts were one thing, and we were under the assumption it was going to be taken care of. Well, that's why I asked for 2 mowers.
And this came about after we've submitted our budget, so it's we're kind of asking after the fact, or it still can be asked, and Mr. Savers can actually help us with that, but,
Is there a drop dead point on this? You have to go to the council and request this money, right?
Yeah.
I think it'd be great discussion as part of the master plan discussion when you're talking with council about that piece of it.
I'm just wondering
Yeah.
if at some point, the council just reverts it back and goes into the general fund.
I don't think you gotta go through the council. If you took out I might be wrong, but if you took out a lease 5 program that's within your budget, all your budget's gotta do is get approved, correct?
I guess.
The way that, so I'll use the campground as an example. If I'm going to change something in the budget, I do have to get requests from council to do that, even if I have the money. So I don't have authority to go spend out of it because they approve.
Change that shit.
Yeah.
I guess if you had a lease program for 5 years, $70,000 or whatever it might be, once they approve it, you've got 5 years.
Well, we'd have to take a look at that coupled with the master plan. 'Cause we're talking about a lot of dollars.
I guess the way I've always thought about this is the master plan, those projects can't totally be tied to our budget, because if we go after that and that's totally coming out of our budget, we'll never have any new equipment.
Jason, I totally agree with
Yeah,
you. The
yeah.
problem is, you still have got to run that through the council.
Yep.
And whichever way they want to look at it, they're looking at the total dollars.
Yep.
So the money that we've requested for the 2 mowers, is that in addition to our projected income? The money for that, is that coming from the city? Or is that just built into our budget?
Built into our budget.
So to get to what Brian's saying, the master plan is separate from this.
Yeah.
So if we decide to go with a lease program, we need to cover that cost with our operating expenses for the year. And I'd say, my recommendation would be to research that for another meeting, just to give us an option of what we're looking at. And it may be too late for this year, I understand that, but
I don't think I don't necessarily think it will. If those two mowers got approved, he could say, hey, I've got a better option. This is a lease program, and come back council, hey, we want to use that 80,000, but we want to put it towards the first payment of our lease program.
good,
So,
better.
yeah, so you could still turn around and do that, and he's got time for that. So we don't have to do that with council right now and right this moment, but we
And
can.
that'd be a good discussion for us, because we're the ones that are working up this budget for the equipment. We're approving that as a board, so yeah.
And if I got a lease program, it would actually be less than what we'd be spending on the two mowers. So, I mean, I don't even know if it'd be 70. I mean, I think 50 or 60. So we'd actually be spending less next year, but we'd be committing ourselves for 5 or whatever.
Right.
So,
Jason, when you lease more or greens, any of that stuff you lease, do they do the maintenance on it, or we just lease it and you still have to do the
Yeah.
maintenance on it?
yeah,
It would have,
Even like the sharpening the blades and all that
no,
kind of stuff?
that's
still-
on us.
That's still all our.
Yeah. The main thing with that is your warranty is just,
Yeah.
when you renew every so often, you have a couple years of full warranty before, and then, so we'll have 2 years of full warranty and then 3 years that we still have pretty new equipment. Well, it's still equipment, still can break down.
You can, but it's less likely.
Less likely, yeah, yep. But it is still equipment. And it can be brand new and still break down, so just less likely.
I think it's worth the time to kind of research that a little bit myself.
It doesn't hurt to throw the feelers out there, what you need and what somebody will lease it to you for.
Well, and the other part of that is I talking to one of my salesmen, prices are going up again and availability it's looking bleaker and bleaker going down the road. They said about 2 years until it straightens out, and that's if things,
You might
So-
not be able to get your mowers to
Liquor golf or
yeah. Yeah, he
There might be shipping sitting on a ship.
He kind of suggested if we could move for earlier than the first of the year, if we can, but we might not necessarily have that option, so.
Well, you don't have anything else to do, so by the next board meeting, have us a proposal.
Listing equipment, how much it's gonna cost.
When do you know what's approved on your budget?
Hopefully not till November.
November?
yeah. I think, I haven't seen the schedule, or it's been a while since I've looked at it. It probably starts in October, and they have their budget hearings, and then the final approval will be in November.
Anything else? So our next meeting will be October 11th. And we are adjourned.
Thank you, Jeff.